It's so good to see you.
Very official now.
Very official Zoom. Hi, Abby. We saw you sneak in too. Okay, so glad to see you all. I know it's been, many of you are able to get together on happy hour on Wednesday night, but for those of us that can't, it's really good to see and be seen. Brienne is with us. I'm so glad. She's cooking, so she may not always have her screen on, which we totally get, but I'm just thankful she could pop in. Brienne is my new friend from school, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But anyways, I'm so glad you're here. Brienne, Imaginarium is the nonprofit that I help to lead, and we are ultimately a space to imagine a better world and then figure out how we intentionally make it so. Our shared values are the belief in the inherent worth and magic of every living thing and every human. The belief in the inherent connection we have to each other, every human being, and the natural world around us. And finally, we believe in inherent responsibility. And that's simply you and I, all of us figuring out daily, like, how can I be responsible, not just to myself, but to others in this world, to making it a better place. And so that's sort of what we center everything that we do around. And so we gather like this once or twice a month, typically twice a month on Sunday afternoons, and we do shared practices, which we'll do in a minute. Short teaching typically, or sharing, sometimes an interview, we have guests, and then always dialogue. So that's sort of the heart of what we do and why we do it. But we have practices that we do every time that we're together. Abby just sent me over some graphics. Thank you, Abby. I'm just going to put them in the chat. So if you want to pull them up there, and it's just for reference, and we'll find a very professional way to do this in the future when I can get it to Nathan on time. But for now, if y'all want to pull them up, but I forget who's kicking us off. Leah?
Naming?
Is it you? Naming? Yes.
Okay.
And are
yes.
you get your Benadryl?
No, they moved their first aid kit though. It's fine. I'll figure it out. So our first practice is the naming practice, where we say our name and our pronouns, and yeah, just a way to connect with each other, show up, take up space. For those of us that talk a lot, it's a reminder to not take up too much space. And for those of us who keep to ourselves, it's a reminder to, or an invitation that you are a part of this space, whether it's your first time or you were here since it was founded. So I'll go first. My name is Leah. I use she, her pronouns, and I am tuning in from Franklin, Tennessee. So we'll start with Nathan.
Nathan, he, him, and Lebanon, Tennessee.
Cool. Melissa.
Melissa, she, her, hers, in Franklin, Tennessee. And
hi, Cindy, she, her, hers, in Elsie's house.
Cool. Sarah.
I'm Sarah, she, her, hers from Nashville.
Chris.
Chris Hauser from Brentwood, he, him, his. Linda is indisposed, but will be with us shortly, my wife.
Malia.
Malia, she, her, also from Brentwood.
Brienne.
Hi, I'm Brienne. I'm from Brentwood, but I'm in Murfreesboro right now. And I've never said the phrase she, her, hers before, but I feel like that's what's resonating with me based on what everyone else said.
Cool. That works. Abby.
Abby Lane, she, her, hers, East Nashville.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad everybody is here. It's a little smaller than sometimes, but I like it. All right, now it's time to go to Melissa.
actually, Chris, you're gonna do this one? Tell me something good.
I think I was down for the Stop, Breathe, Know Your Worth, but
Great.
I can.
No, it's great. I texted you. I confused you. Hey, our next practice. Hey, I just sent in the chat. Tell me if y'all can open it. I think it's going to be big when you open it, but if you can, this is our little label if you see it. And if not, it's no big deal. But our next practice is called Tell Me Something Good. And it is an opportunity, which is very fitting for our topic of joy today, of naming the good in our world. And this is not dismissive of the bad and the tragic. This is alongside all of that, but we believe that it is a good practice to begin to see and name and celebrate the good. So this can be the good in your family, or the good at work, or the good at your neighborhood, in our city, where you saw it in the world. It really, the sky's the limit for what you can share. But we have to sing the song. So if you will unmute, it's a lovely chaotic moment. Everybody, I see you muted. I see you still muted. Leah, I'm looking for you. Okay, so we'd sing, tell me something good. Ready? All right, sorry, I was giving you the tone. Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4.
Tell me something good.
This makes me so happy to hear. Okay, who's up? This is just popcorn style. If you got something good to share.
I'll go. I have a really big one. So last we checked in, I interviewed for this job. I did not get the job. It was a little disappointing. However, it actually really opened up, the good part of that is it opened up a lot of new doors for me and just really clarified a lot for me about my direction in my career, which is great. The big thing though is I bought a house in the last month. So yay. I closed Friday, so I'll be moving to East Nashville.
Whoa.
And yeah,
Hipster.
I know. So I'm very excited about that. And it came on a little bit quicker than I thought, but everything, the universe is good and making everything align, and everything aligned. And it was my first offer on my first house, and I went in at asking price and got it. So we got it. So it was wild. So in this market. So I'm very excited. I'll have a party. Y'all be invited. It'll be great.
If you feel comfortable sharing, what neighborhood is it in?
Yeah, it's like right off it's like Ellington to Trinity Lane, like over in the Oakwood Park. I think it's called Shepherd Hood. I don't know. There's a bunch of new townhomes, but it's a little dead end street. It's by probably a mile away from like Grimey's, and like then the other way is East Nashville Brewworks. So right over there.
Cool.
Yeah.
I'm right off the 2 exits down from you.
Nice. Okay, great. Yeah.
Love it. That's so exciting. Thanks for sharing that. Anybody else? What's good in your life?
Well, since we're talking about houses, we also bought a house in Nashville, South Nashville. But I think it'll be really good. We're closing on the 1st of June. So.
Yay. Is this the same one that Ashley sent over, or a new one?
I think it's probably the same one. Yeah, it was kind of a roller coaster. We offered way over asking, and then they went with somebody who offered higher, and then those people fell through, and we were the second bid, so we had a backup offer in, and they took it, and so we're moving towards closing. So really excited about that.
Where in South Nashville?
It's off of Holt Drive. It's right around like across from Lenox Village, basically.
Oh yeah. Okay. Cool. Very cool.
And Holt is what connects Nolensville Road with Edmondson Pike.
Correct.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Love it. You're closer, Sarah.
Yes.
You're closer to some. That's what matters. But Nathan and Ashley are a lot closer, maybe, to all of us. So that's super.
Yes. Yeah, we're super excited.
Yay! Amazing.
I can go.
Yeah.
And to continue in the East Nashville thing, Meg is moving over there on Sunday, June 6th, and within half a mile of where they were born, at home with a midwife.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
Yep. So a fun little adventure awaits. We won't be seeing Meg as much as we used to, living closer to us, but we're really excited.
That's great.
Excited for them. Yesterday, I know you're talking about joy today. I had a burst of joy that was so intense yesterday that I kind of broke down and cried. I was so overcome. And it's a silly, simple thing, but pre-pandemic, I would feel so elated when I would have a day ahead of me where I would have like 4, 5, 6 meetings in a row, and I would go from one to the other, and I would plot out the travel times between each, and I would get to the end of the day and I'd be like, man, I nailed it. You know, it was just like one of those crazy things in my head about being able to coordinate all that stuff. And yesterday I did all these things in a 45-minute period of yesterday was our anniversary, and Calypso Cafe, there was only one that's reopened in the post-pandemic on 100 Oaks, and we love Calypso Cafe, and we hadn't eaten there in well over a year. And so I had recycling, and then a trip to Publix for birdseed and flowers, and then calling ahead to Calypso Cafe and getting in there 4 minutes before they closed to pick it up. And it was just like this thing that was so perfect the way it all worked. And I came home and Linda was like, wow, you like, I couldn't hold you down. I couldn't hold you back if I had to. It was really, really funny. But there was just all this elation and joy, and being able to do something really nice for Linda with the birdseed, the flowers, and the food that was her request. And so it was incredibly a joyful moment.
I love it. Happy anniversary
Thank
to
you. It was great.
Really.
Thanks.
I thought for sure when you said you had this joyful moment that you were going to share about that record situation that you just
right.
Sure
Yeah. That's funny.
You've had a lot of good this week. Amazing. Anybody else? Yeah, Malia.
Well, yesterday we went to the Richland Park Farmers Market, and we specifically because that's where Katie Pie's sets up. And so I was in the mood for some Katie Pie's treats, so we got some of that. And a woman that I've been following on social media for a while now, named Rhonda, who has this business called Perfectly Cordial, was set up there, and we got to spend some lovely moments with her. She was, talking about her business. She makes these, they're simple syrups, so they're mix-ins for cocktails or mocktails. And she's it's a Black-owned business, local, Nashville entrepreneur. She's been a nurse, and she just recently was able to quit her job to do full-time this, business that she really loves. So it was so fun. There was like 4 of us standing there, David and I and a couple other people, and she had a sample several of her simple syrups, and she's telling us how to use them, and she was so enthusiastic about a product. I'm just like, oh my gosh, she's taking my money. And I like walked away with 4 bottles of simple syrup, and then made myself a fun cocktail, and sampled them all last night. That was fun. And then we also, so our daughter turns 21 next week, but she and her boyfriend are on their way to Virginia right now for a birthday road trip to go visit some friends. So we won't be with her on Wednesday. So we took her out to lunch yesterday too, and she introduced us to this place called Hawkers in East Nashville. And yeah, it was really, really good. So it was just a nice, good day all around.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it. Love hearing all of that. Thank you for sharing. My tell me something good is that I got to spend the weekend with my dearest Abby Lane. We just had the most lovely and intense and joy. There was lots of laughter, lots of whiskey, just lots of good content shared. But I'm just really grateful that she was with me. Abby and I have been friends, as most of you know. She started out as my nanny, and then it just became like kindred spirits really quickly, and now I believe she's like a soul sister. So really grateful for Abby and the time we got to share this. Anybody else? Okay, great. Oh, thanks, Abs. I see your ditto. All right, just know it's a practice to name the good. Okay, who is up? I think it's Sarah.
Yep. So a part of our practices, we also like to acknowledge the land, and so to take a moment to acknowledge where we are and to acknowledge that the erasure of the indigenous people of the land, to acknowledge that this land, if you're in Nashville, was once inhabited by the Shawnee and Cherokee. And in acknowledging it's a way of healing ourselves in the land, and also restoring that light into creation, and allowing creation to shine as it was intended to do so. And also just to give a shout out to nature right now as we emerge from this kind of pandemic without our masks on, and just to be able to see all the colors. And sorry, my allergies are, we acknowledge allergies too in this season, but we are grateful because we are outside and living it. But just the colors and the way, and the growth that you see, and how that is a reminder of how you are growing as well. And the sounds of life that remind us that we're not alone. And as we emerge from this pandemic again, and just that we're so deeply connected. And my mom always said that if there is not an R in the month, right? You can be barefoot, right? If there's an R in the month, you've got to have your shoes on. So it's May. So I encourage you to go out and ground yourself in creation, literally walk in the grass, put some bug spray on or whatever you need to, but bring yourself to the present this summer as we get into that time, and just give thanks for all that creation is doing in you and each other. So maybe so.
Sarah, I love that. And also that feels very synchronistic with something I'm going to share in a few minutes. But thank you so much for all of that. I'm putting something in the chat again. I hope you can open this. When we met, our last gathering we sort of did a community check-in and discussed with each other our practices and why we do what we do and what we can change and how we can continue to adapt. And so just know each of these things that we're doing are very intentional and yet very open to be adapted and changed as we go, as we can do things better. And so one of our things is what started out as an anti-racist statement that we wrote in light of last year, and sort of becoming more aware as a nation of all the injustice that continues to happen. Then it was specifically on behalf of Black people, and what later became aware of many more people groups are involved in the injustices that are happening, not just in our nation, but all over the world. So because of that, we wrote this statement, and then we decided out of our talk last time, really we wanted to name it more as a commitment, because this is a call to action. And Nathan has said this over and over and over as he shared it before. This is simply by stating this thing together, it is just the beginning of our work, and not just work on this statement, right, as we tweak it and make sure that we're being inclusive of as many people as we possibly can be, but also that literally this statement is the beginning of the work that we should be doing whenever we get off calls like this and live into our lives throughout the rest of the week. So we always want that to be said and shared. But if you can open it on the screen and read it as I read it too, we would love to invite you to commit yourself to this as well. We as a community recognize that white supremacy and systemic racism are an insidious part of our society. We recognize the harmful impact of its presence in our lives and the impact it has on Asian American, Pacific Islander, Black, Indigenous, and people of color members of this community and other communities around us. We commit ourselves to an active practice of anti-racism. We commit to uprooting and addressing racism whenever and wherever we find it, starting within each of us and extending into our communities and the greater world around us. And finally, Chris. Oh, you're muted.
Thank you. Let's take a moment to ground ourselves, coming back to our breath. We're going to put our hands together like this, flat. But let's, as we do this, if you're able to close your eyes, both feet on the floor, take a deep breath in, let it out. This is a way for us to slow down, get back in touch with our bodies and ourselves. Slowly, we'll go from thumb to pinky tapping and say, stop, breathe, know your worth. Again, stop, breathe, know your worth. One more time. Stop, breathe, know your worth. Thanks.
Hi, Linda. We're so glad to see you. Happy post-birthday, happy anniversary, all the things. So glad you're with us. Okay, y'all. So I wanted to talk about joy today. And I say talk, not just in me share, but in all of us talk, hopefully, if you feel comfortable. I want to give you a brief reflection on what has stirred in me these past couple of weeks, this idea and the thoughts that I've had. And then I'm going to offer some questions, which hopefully we will respond and discuss together. One of the things we talked about in our last meeting together and where we were touching base with the community was just the value of dialogue and of conversation and of hearing from one another, literally during these hours together, but also just all the time, right? That's the beauty of happy hour and anytime you get to be one-on-one with people. So I want to make sure, and for us to intentionally make sure that dialogue and response does not feel like an afterthought, but it's a very vital part of who Imaginarium is and our ethos here. Just like the naming practice that we started with is a way to introduce yourself and to take up your space. Also, this dialogue in a few moments is again a reminder for you to use your voice and to also listen, and for all of us to reflect together and hopefully learn together and grow together. Okay, so joy. Part of our imagining a better world and includes imagining a better us, right? It includes taking responsibility for us, understanding how we can do better and think better and live better, right? To live into our wholeness, to live fully, to live authentically, to live free. Like that's what we're going for, is the liberation and freedom of our lives and everyone else's. As well. And so I think when we do that as individuals, then we also, just by our being and living, invite others to do that as well, and invite others to wholeness and freedom and fullness. So what I found this spring and what I've been paying attention to in myself and then trying to pay attention to in people around me is that joy is lacking in so many of our lives. It's often not valued and it's not then prioritized. And I noticed for me, it was lacking in my life. When I think about joy, like I think about Christmas time, right? I think about winter. I think like that's a season of joy. Great, it has its place, but I don't often think about how it should have its place in my daily walking, right? My daily talk, my daily experiences. So much like the practice in the beginning of tell me something good, it's not dismissive of the bad or the current horrible tragedies that happen in our own lives and in the world. Naming and cultivating joy does not mean to be dismissive of that either. And this is especially important for me to say today personally, as I had, as I mentioned, a really joyous weekend. And have been really excited to talk about joy today with you all. And then this morning on my way home from this retreat, I got a call from my mom with some news about my nephew, her grandson. And without divulging anything, it's a tragic situation. He's safe, so know that, please. But there are some things rising to the surface that haven't been dealt with and that are extremely painful, not just for him, but for my sister and her husband, there's his stepdad, and for all of us in various ways. And so I name that to sort of be really honest with, yes, we talk about joy, but it's in the midst of other things, right? It's in the midst of facing tragedy and hardship too. Pema Chodron, have you read, and if I'm pronouncing her name wrong and somebody knows, please correct me, but she's a Buddhist teacher and author and nun. Have any of you read her? I'm trying to also see the screen a little bit, Chris, or heard of her? If you haven't heard of her, please mark it down to follow her online and or buy any of her books. But one of her most famous books is called When Things Fall Apart. And in it, she says this: things falling apart is a kind of testing, and it's also a kind of healing. We think that the point is to pass the test or to overcome the problem. But the truth is that things really don't get solved. They come together and they fall apart. then they come together again and they fall apart again. It's just like that. But the healing comes from letting there be room for all of it to happen. Room for grief, room for relief, room for misery, and room for joy. So that speaks to me of what we talk about so often, this idea of wholeness. And it's synchronistically a beautiful reminder, not just to myself, but hopefully to all of us, right? To not just be able for me to speak something and to teach something, but also how do I live this thing that I want to challenge all of us to live, right? And that is the goal. Martha Beck, another profound author and spiritual guide. If you don't know Martha, you need to know her and read her and listen to all her things. But she says this, she says, my ultimate purpose is not to live, it is to experience joy if joy is possible. And I love that. And I would tweak that, and it may just be semantics to not negate what she just said. But I think the challenge is, and my realization is, in living fully, that means we are going to need to experience, to name, and to cultivate joy. That would include having a full life. So these past 4 months has brought this new job into my life, which I've spoken about before. And not just this new job, it's also brought a new rhythm in my life, where I've had to be in bed by 10:30, which is new for me, in order to get a full night's sleep to wake up at 6:20. And for those of you that have had, big adult jobs for a long time with regular sleep schedules, sorry that I'm just now, having to be a part of a job that does that, but it has. So with this new job, has brought this new rhythm and new people in my life, some of which I'm really thankful that school ended on Friday and I don't have to be around these adults anymore. Others of which I'm really grateful to have found some new friendships, and one of those key people is Brianne. So I'm really glad that Brianne is on this call. Brianne is the one that I predominantly got to work with at the middle school. She was the lead teacher and the one that I got to serve alongside and under. So in the classroom, in Brianne's classroom, we had 6th, 7th, and 8th grade children. But specifically, this is a special education room. And without divulging anything that's not allowed and or not necessary, I have to tell you all about how these kids brought and reminded me of the power and the necessity of joy, and how much I've been missing it. So I want to tell you about these kids. B, and I'll just say a letter for their names. B in the front of the room is brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. He has a speech impediment that takes some time to learn how to decipher and understand, but literally out of all the students in the room, he has an answer for every question, and seemingly 9 out of 10 times he's right. He's correct. He's also very sarcastic and at times even inappropriate, but he knows he is, and he's trying to be funny while he's doing it. And he does so in such a way that makes you laugh, and he knows exactly what he's doing. And it's funny to watch him say it, him watch you try to decipher it, and then once you get it, him have a whole new sarcastic, cute smile on his face. So that's B. C, on the other side of the front of the room, is maybe to me the most endearing. It's when he speaks or tries to speak and put sentences together, sometimes his voice squeaks in just the cutest of ways. He's always good for a hug. He will quickly seemingly become best pals with any of the other students that come into the room. He has a shyness and a welcoming spirit about him. T in the room is by far the most obstinate and the most committed, if you will, whether it be to literally hanging on to her iPad, where you're having to try to rip it out of her hands when it's time to stop or move on to something else, or her being equally committed to singing songs like Let It Go with great gusto and twirling around the room. L, in the back of the room, is among the few that are nonverbal, but she holds the award for being the loudest in the room. Brianne is shaking her head. She also offers a double clap when she's happy or in agreement with something you said. She would also gently lay her head on your shoulder, and I watched her do it with Brianne multiple times when you would sing her a lullaby. E is somewhere between the most frustrated by his environment and someone's unwillingness to understand what he wants and what he was trying to communicate. And at the same time, he could be the most excited about things like food and snack time and lunchtime. So whether it's him calling out to us, snacka, 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 and then repeating the time, or go for lunch and asking what time, and we would repeat back to him the time, he was always the one to try to keep us on track. M in the room is the crooner, literally teaching and sometimes manipulating his way into the hearts of both the teachers and the adults and many of the students, sometimes making his way into trouble and other times just burrowing his way into your soul. O was the laughter of the room in so many ways, but one of the main things that I loved were his daily shirts that his mom would bring him in, and or maybe he's choosing, I'm not really sure, but they would either offer something sarcastic like I'm extra, like guacamole, or just pure wisdom like be a kind human, be a kind human. And finally, N. N was my special friend, who I was most responsible for when I was her one-on-one in the room underneath Brienne. N is nonverbal too, besides sometimes an exaggerated hi. It's really all she can say. She would communicate otherwise through grunts or through whines, much quieter than L in the back of the room, but she also used a talking device. And she wore what I would call a smug side eye for most of the time as a look on her face. And you could receive that as her either being annoyed or above this mundane type of work, like let's get over this and on to something else, until she decided she wanted to ask for music. And so the universe and synchronicity and Brienne helped to know that Nicole's deep love of music and dance would fit hand in hand with Miss Melissa's deep love of music and dance. And so when she asked through her device to listen, I want to listen to One Direction, the first time, I gleefully break out Spotify on my phone and pull out One Direction. And once it started to play, Nicole not only smiles, this huge smile, but she laughed exuberantly, almost like a yelling version of a laugh out loud, so much so that she would begin to hold her breath and jump triumphantly, all the while One Direction and Miss Melissa and often some of the rest of the room, right, join in on What Makes You Beautiful, this song that got very annoying, but we loved it every day. And without fail, it was contagious and pure joy. And it happened every single time I was with her. Every single time. Can we listen to One Direction? You put it on, she reacts like that. And I had forgotten, y'all, I just had forgotten how much I needed joy, how much I value joy, that I needed to be more intentional about finding it, about naming the things that bring me joy. And that when I do that, when I find joy, when I receive joy, when I act out joy, when I respond to it, that is contagious for the people around me, as it was to me with her. Wendell Berry says, make a story. Show how love and joy and beauty and goodness shine out amongst the rubble. Ralph Waldo Emerson said, there is no beautifier of complexion or form or behavior like the wish to scatter joy and not pain around us. So just like these kids, right, and especially N, showed me and reminded me these three things. There is no shame in repeating joy. There's no shame in repeating joy day after day. That joy, when felt and was seen, it kept you present and in the moment, right there. You weren't looking past, you weren't looking to the future, you weren't looking back, you were right there in the moment with her. Joy can be very intentional. I knew what I was doing every day when I would ask, when I realized she wanted this and would respond to this, and we were done with the schoolwork at the end. I knew I could be intentional about bringing about joy in her life, and that would bring it about in my life because it was always contagious, right? So I am just been thinking about joy and how can I remind myself and remind us then, how can we intentionally reach for thoughts, reach for things, reach for experiences that feel good, that is okay and necessary and good for all of us to reach for these things that feel good. And then in those moments, how can we allow ourselves to actually feel the fullness of that energy? Not just a taste of it, not just a little, but the fullness of that energy. So how can we give joy? What does it look like for you and I to show up and give someone joy, or give someone a reason to be joyful? Madeline Leinkel says, joy is always a promise. It's holding something for someone. It's inviting them in. Joy is always a promise. And then I was reminded this morning, somewhat ironically because it's scripture and I don't normally go to scripture, but in the Psalms, in the Old Testament or the Hebrew Bible, David, the psalmist David says, weeping may last for a night, but joy comes with a shout in the morning. A shout of joy comes in the morning. There's different translations of it. And this morning, literally, Abby and I are outside in nature. And by morning, I mean like it's 4 a.m. in the morning outside. And we were separate, we weren't together, but both of us, as we've talked since then, we're looking forward to daylight for a lot of reasons. It had been dark, it had been a long time. We'd been outside processing. You could, hear critters around you. We were in a safe space, but you could hear noises and you couldn't quite see them yet because it's dark, even though the stars were beautiful. Y'all, I have a shot that I'll share of the sky from the middle of the night last night. But I wasn't fully prepared that when the sun would begin to rise this morning, and it happened around 4:30, 4:40 is when I no longer needed a flashlight to see my journal. I was not prepared for the symphony of song that the birds started to sing. It happened as like for our corner of the earth that we're in, that when those animals felt and saw the sun and woke up, it could easily be described as the birds offering shouts of joy for this new day had come, to maybe remind themselves or remind others, or maybe remind Abby and I in that moment. And to just be reminded that that beautiful rhythm happens every 24 hours. It was just another simple reminder to me of the necessity and my needed awareness of joy. And it also led to appreciation and gratitude, which I think all joy does, actually. It will lead us to appreciation and gratitude. I also want to note just that joy, I think, nourishes us. It nourishes our spirits. It gives us strength, strength to resolve then to fight for what is good and necessary in the world, for what is needed to change the world. Joy will buoy us. And we talk about change all the time here, and the change that needs to happen again in our lives in the world. And I think this is one of the things that will help bring that change about ultimately. So, what brings you joy? I'm very interested, and I have some specific questions, but I just first want to open it up to simply, when you think about joy or hear joy, does it bring up an occasion in your mind? Does it bring up a definition? Does it make you happy to think about? Do you feel like you're a joyous person that already cultivates this? Tell me what you're thinking. And I'll wait with my wine.
I want to comment about the birds because when I Marco Polo people, I'm usually outside, or when I talk to people, or even now you might be able to hear them, but people always comment. They're like, "Oh my gosh, the birds," and I didn't even notice. And so like those people recognizing that joy of the birds, I was like, "Oh yeah, you're right." And so ever since that moment, this spring, springtime, I'm like, "Oh yeah." So that's great. I love that connection too.
Yeah, that's why what you said earlier.
Yeah.
In the land acknowledgement and the honoring of earth and nature,
Yeah.
and all of it.
Love it. Yeah.
Love it. Who else?
I think for me, it's singing along in a crowd at the top of my lungs. A little bit drunk, maybe, but just at a concert and singing along, and just the camaraderie and the shared experience of just the intensity of being in that is very, very deep joy for me.
And you've missed that this pandemic year.
Yep, very much. Yep.
I get it. I appreciate Who else? Just write off like joy. Okay. Oh, I'm checking on Leah. Leah's still there, but I'm glad you're feeling a little bit better, Leah. But we recognize why you're not on camera. Water. Are you telling her to drink water? Oh, being near water. Being near water brings Sarah joy. Lovely.
Yeah. I got to hang on the river yesterday for the first time, like be on water for the first time since like pandemic-esque. So that was really, I was like, yes, this is joy. That's great.
Love it. Leah, fully agree. Yeah. Who else? Again, just initial, like Malia, initially, when you think about joy, what comes to mind?
Oh gosh. Baking. I love making things that taste good, and I love seeing the people's faces when they eat things that I have made. That definitely brings me a lot of joy. When my kids get excited about stuff and, just find something that makes them joyful. And that's been especially poignant this past year, obviously. Just there's been some struggles, especially with our son, and just the times when he just started a new job on last Thursday. He's his very first job ever was working at the movie theater in Cool Springs, AMC Thoroughbred. And he left that job last winter. I forget exactly when. I think it was in December. And he's been doing a couple other things since then, but he really missed the theater, and he saw that Regal was opening and hiring. So he has a new job at the Green Hills movie theater, the Regal Cinema. And he just started last week, and just, yeah, he was so excited about it, and seeing him when he came home, and just being happy to be back. He really likes that industry, and, to be back in that situation again, that was good, because things have been really tough for him. So just anything that makes the people that I love joyful and happy makes me joyful and happy too.
Love it. Love it.
And water. I agree with water. I agree with singing, and I agree with Chris. I purchased my first set of concert tickets for the first time, in over a year. And then this past week, we purchased another season, a symphony season. We missed doing that. So yeah, all of that. I agree with all that.
There's no one better to sing along with than Switchfoot, in my opinion. That's who you've got tickets for. That's a great sing along.
All of them are going to be great.
I think too, for us, for me personally, seeing our kids get along, and with joy and laughter, having us all laugh together when we are together is, boy, that's just a magical experience. So
Sarah,
I definitely agree with that too. Sorry, that just sparked something else in me. Just recently, there have been, over the past several months, because we've all been here together, and just the times when it's just the four of us, either sitting around the table or sitting around the fire in the back, or on the couch and just talking, and everybody, and my kids, they're, they didn't always get along, but they definitely get along now. And yeah, exactly what you were saying, Chris, just the fact that they can enjoy each other's company, we can all four of us enjoy each other together, is definitely a good thing.
I love it.
Yeah, I agree with what a lot of other folks have said. The kids laughing and having a good time and things like that is always, but immediately comes to mind when I think of joy. But also Chris's reference earlier today about the just the sense of accomplishment and the joy that brings. That's the same with me. Once I've done something that was maybe out of character or difficult or whatever for myself, I always feel really good about it, and this sort of sense of joy from that experience.
Okay, I love that. Thank you, Nathan. Here's something. What is something that is coming up for you, an upcoming situation that you know could use joy? I'm gonna give you a moment to ponder, and not everyone has to answer out loud, but if anyone would feel so comfortable, what's an upcoming situation that you have to face or deal with, or a person, you know, that you have to see that you know you can name could use a little joy? And then understanding that, right? How can you bring joy into that? Again, this is not being dismissive of, you know, negative actions, negative people. It's not giving them permission to just, you know, be whatever. It's saying, what can we do, right? What can we do to add joy to the situation? So think on that for a minute. I wish I had Jeopardy music or something to play. But if you got something and you're willing to share it, we would love to hear it.
I think we're just entering into an exceptionally busy season. I've got lots of things that are happening at work, some surveys that I manage that are fielding or ending fielding. My wife is starting a new job on June 1st. We're closing on a new house on June 1st. Like, we're moving on June 4th. Like, there's just a lot of busyness that's going to happen. And I suspect, you know, all of that may have little pockets of natural joy in them, but also, you know, could use definitely a healthy dose of joy,
Yeah.
you know, through that experience.
Yeah, it's the stress part of those experiences, right?
Yeah.
New home, joyful, but now there's a ton of work. New job, joyful. Now there's a ton of work to learn new to it. Yeah, that's perfect examples. Like, how can we bring then, or be reminded of the joy of those decisions, right? Or when those things be, and carry that with us into the hard parts. I love that, Nathan. Abby, typing. It apparently makes me cry to try to say words today. She says, I think specifically as a post-Christian, joy has been really hard for me to relearn after having a symbol of suffering as the sort of gatekeeper of joy, which was named as heaven or salvation, etc. It was really damaging to my understanding of how to create or feel joy without guilt or complication. Thank you for that, Abby. I'm sure a few of us could resonate deeply with that. Yeah, maybe that's partly why this experience with these kids was, I just didn't realize how much I needed it and wanted it, right? And it's surprised, you know, that whole, there's a saying, you're surprised by joy. I was so deeply surprised and really moved, especially the first couple of times it happened within, but also the fact that it would happen every single time was just like this gleeful. It wasn't she wasn't doing it because she, you know, had some expectation in mind. She's doing it because she was feeling it and she wanted to share it immediately. And that was such a surprise and such a reminder. So I get that, Leah. I resonate with that. Malia totally resonates. For some reason, if y'all aren't looking at the chat, I'm just reading out loud what they're saying.
And what a good reminder, because I remember that I maybe rolled my eyes when you got excited, like, oh, she doesn't know. This isn't exciting. This happens every day. So maybe what a good reminder that maybe even the things that others have started to take as mundane actually are joyful, but that we may have started to roll our eyes at it. Like going back to the example of like your kids getting along, like hopefully as parents, we never get to a point where we just experience that without joy or without taking notice that, oh, our kids are getting along. We should be joyful about this. This is something that we've hoped for and wanted for, and we should experience this. Because yeah, I definitely was like, why don't we pick a different artist? Maybe move on from One Direction. Who else does she like? Who else is on that iPad?
We definitely did try. I will say that we tried, but it just didn't get the same response. I love that, Brianne. Thank you for that reminder.
Well, I even think back to when our kids were little, even as a baby, even when babies do the same thing, it's so joyful, like just a little or a toddler doing the same thing over and over and over again for 2 hours straight. And it's like, they don't have to do anything else. I would feel such connection and so much joy from the thing that they were doing and the laughter or whatever it was. The other thing I would say is looking ahead, a week from Tuesday, I'm going to Orlando. So it's my first trip in a year and a half. And it's my first convention since 2018. This big radio convention that I'm a part of. And I'm so pumped about seeing so many people that I've not been around in well over a year and a half. And I'm super excited about being in the midst of a few hundred people. And this is my week. It's my Super Bowl week that I've not had for the last 2 years in 2019 and 2020. So that's going to be a great opportunity to actually give myself in a joyful way to other people and create those experiences.
Love that. Yeah, that's my final question for us is like, what can be our takeaway from this? What can you say? And this was part of our other commentary from our last gathering too, to really hone in on, okay, so what? We talked about this thing, but now what? We're done talking about it. We're done. No, like we want to apply this in some way. So Chris, that's a beautiful example of like, how can I apply this, use this, be reminded of this in work? So I would ask the rest of us too, like for me, school's out. So and this girl, my reminder of joy for these past 4 months, is moving on to high school. So that I won't get that anymore. So I've got to find other ways, to purposefully, enjoy things, to name joy when I see it, to feel it, and to disentangle it, per Abby. I mean, I just think that's a great reminder for those of us that grew up in Christian context, to be reminded, one, that Christianity doesn't hold the corner on joy, right? That it's a beautiful word that Christianity has used, in some life-giving ways, and to Abby's point, in some maybe, ways that have, harmed it a little bit, or taken the joy out of it, right? No pun intended. So what are some ways that, each of us, and it may be a different answer for all of us, and that's good because we're all on particular unique journeys. But what can your takeaway be, with joy as you go into this week? Buy more plants. Great. That brings Abby joy. Buying more plants. Love it.
I think, oh, go ahead.
Are you sure? Okay. So, a year and a half ago, we started adding a quarterly section to our newsletter called Delight that I curate. And I mean, delight and joy are somewhat synonymous. And the reason why I added it, was because I realized after I listened to a particular podcast on being, that inspired that when we take delight in something, it's because we're noticing what's going on around us. And I think that's the thing with joy, is that we have to recognize that it's happening, that it's really easy to just, not always name it as joy, and not always name something as delight, or not always name something as pleasure. And I think all three of those are very much wrapped up in each other. So that's just, for me, that's what I have to remember. Like those moments that I was talking about earlier with my family, like the fact that I'm remembering them is because I took the opportunity and I took a few moments and I said, I want to remember this. I want to remember us all sitting around the fire on Beltane because that was what I wanted to do. And everybody just naturally congregating around the fire together, and us talking and laughing, and just being together, or sitting around the table. Oddly enough, in this over a year of us all being home together, we haven't really sat at our table together a whole lot. We ended up in front of the television on the couch. So the times that we have actually sat together, the four of us, sometimes the five of us, if my daughter's boyfriend is here, just being together in each other's presence. And I have to intentionally think about it and remember it, and know that it's delightful, know that I'm taking, that it's a joyful thing.
Abby, I love that reminder, Malia. Somehow delight feels more accessible than joy. The language shift of that is really helpful for me as a word lover. Beautiful. Synchronistic right there. Thank you, Malia and Abby. Anybody else?
I think something I think about too is like reclaiming joy in old spaces. Well, I've been in Nashville for like 6 years, and just specifically the last like couple of months have gone through some relationships that have ended or seasons have ended, and not allowing the joy to like being grateful for the joy that I experienced, but also know that there's new joy to be found. And so like kind of a mission that I've been like journaling a lot about lately is like, okay, there is new joy to be found. Like where is it? And just I'm moving, letting that be like a physical reminder of like, this is, turning the page, but also to know that, it's there's so much out there, and like to have joy in old places that you may once hold a different memory, but being able to know that joy is not exhaust. You didn't exhaust joy in this one experience, this one relationship. Yeah, I don't know, something I'm thinking about.
I love it. Joy is not exhaustive. Beautiful. Thank you for that. Anybody else? Take away with joy.
I can go. So I think I've been thinking about this since the first question you asked, when you were like, what do you think of when you think of joy? Are you a joyful person? And like everybody's answer seemed to be things that brought them joy. And that was not the first thing that popped into my head. Like what I thought was like, I do typically consider myself, and have usually like in the past considered myself, a joyful person. But I feel like lately I haven't been. And I find joy in a lot of things. I find a lot of joy in a lot of like small random things that other people don't find joy in. But I don't know how many of you have read Glennon Doyle's book, Untamed. But in it, she talks a lot about an internal knowing. In retrospect, I think that's probably what, when I was a Christian, was like the Holy Spirit or your conscience. But it's just like the you deep down. And so thinking, I know, was it Malia who was talking about delight and joy? For me, joy, when I think of joy, I think of the word peace. And so like being able to have joy, like deep down joy, is tied to like satisfaction and being at peace with myself. So yeah, in terms of my actionable item, one, full honesty here. One, I recently like reduced my dose of antidepressants after a conversation with my doctor, and I think I might need to go back up, because I feel like this lower, not feeling a lot of joy has had to do with that. So I feel like that is one practical step that I can take that probably doesn't apply to other people, but yeah. And the other thing is just working on really listening to my knowing. And I feel like there's this internal battle between my like surface level, what I think will bring me happiness, or maybe what will bring me happiness in the moment, and what sounds like a good idea, versus deep down what I think I really need to do to handle this situation. So I think I need to come to peace with my knowing and follow that in order to get that like internal joy back going on.
I love it. Thank you, Leah. All of it. And we say cheers, yes, to necessary helpful medication. Yes, yes, yes. Anybody else? Any added thoughts? And zero pressure to add, but if you want to speak, we want to hear it.
I love the little close your eyes, breathe finger thing that Chris had us do at the beginning. I teach fitness classes, and often at the end, we are quiet for like a minute, 2 minutes. And I've recently had a client who, I think I just noticed it maybe 3 weeks ago, but it's probably been going on for months. I just noticed it 3 weeks ago. She leaves the studio early. And I maybe didn't notice it because she always had a reason. There was a soccer game or a birthday party or a blow up slide that she had to go set up. Like there was always something. And so I promise I'll get to a point. But so I purposely, in a class where we weren't going to lay down and be quiet, I purposely made everyone stand and be quiet with their eyes closed, because she never gave me a reason that she had to leave the room. And I wanted to see if she could be still, and she couldn't. She went and got the spray and started spraying off her mat while we're all trying to be quiet. I'm not bragging that I'm able to be quiet for 1 minute with my eyes closed, but I am noticing that it is not something that everyone can do. And I was, okay, so now I'm going to bring it back around. So I love the words that Chris said, but I think that maybe something that could be intentional and actionable to do would be to say something that has joy with it, with your eyes closed while you're breathing. And I love the kinesthetic part of adding the fingers into it. So that could be a way to think about it moving forward.
I love it. Thank you, Brienne.
Something else. Oh, go ahead.
One of the things I was just going to reference is a practice that I picked up from Richard Rohr was around the practice of reflecting in nature. So go and find something that is really benign and uninteresting, and just focus on it and appreciate it, and to bring about the recognition that you are likely the only person that may have ever gone and appreciated this one rock or lizard or whatever it is. And it's sort of this, I don't know what it is about that practice that brings me joy, but through that practice of like being in nature and taking the time to sort of slow down and notice things is something that brings about joy for me.
Love it.
So that's something I'll probably try to be a little bit more intentional about in the next few weeks.
Yeah, I love that. That goes hand in hand. Also, what Sarah invited us into, and yeah,
And Malia, yeah.
Malia, all of it. Now's the time to get outside, to pay attention, to pause, to feel the ground. That thing about taking your shoes off, right? You take our shoes off, feel the ground, and then pay attention to that mundane leaf or whatnot. I love it, Nathan. Thank you for that. Who else? Was it Sarah?
I just was going to say I loved how you said joy should have its daily place in our lives, and kind of being unapologetic about that. I think when I think about being in a school setting, like sometimes it's really hard and my joy can come off maybe aloof, or like, how could you be joyful when all this crap is happening, and with kids and stress and And so a practice that I've tried to is just a true joy for, like, we get to do this. We get to work with these brilliant humans every day, but it's hard sometimes when like the norm is not that. And so you just reminding me of like that it does have a daily place, and to be unapologetic about that. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Anybody else? Love it. Okay, let's be challenged to take it, do all these things that every one of you just offered. Beautiful things, challenging things. Like, let's take it and let's live into it. Like, that's the point. Don't just leave it here for this hour. Hey, we end our gatherings with a toast, whether you don't have to have a drink in hand, but if you have it, be it water or wine. It's really our cheers to each other and to life. I'm going to put this poem in the chat so you can look at the words while I share it with us. I found this, I think it was literally probably a year ago that I was exposed to this, and I was searching through Evernote and I was like, oh, this is a good one. It's worth bringing back again. So this is Dandelion by Victoria Lynn. Let's gather our goodness like fistfuls of dandelions. Let's press our joy into one another's wrist with a yellow smudge. Roll down the hill together with a faith punctuated by small suns of wonder. Reject the notion that bright, lovely things can be weeds. reclaim what we instinctively know. Blowing seeds is good for our souls. Let's remember that when we stand alone, a stark stalk stripped of our sphere of hope, as if all we have is a persistent, tangled existence, as if we cannot hear the echo of our own yellow. Let's remember that even then we are gorgeous and good and fully connected, our taproot traveling under the earth, gathering necessary nutrients to burst forth again. Let's remember that in our lives and our deaths, it is love that sees the truth of who we are as we stand barefoot in the field of our collective yellow goodness, following only the melody of sunshine, strong enough to push our way through cracks in concrete. Cheers, my friends, to goodness, to spring, to all of you, to us. Thanks for being here. Our email will go out in the morning. Thanks to Malia. We join every Wednesday night. There's a happy hour situation that's on that same link that I sent out, where it's just literally check in, bring your drinks or not, just bring your conversation and all you are to that moment. And then we will gather again. I think it's 2 weeks from tonight. So looking forward to it. So have an amazing week, y'all. Thanks for being here. Bye.